If you actively avoid walking under ladders but delight in finding a four-leaf clover, you're in good company. For many of us, old superstitions have been handed down over time. Break a mirror and it's 7 years. And then there's Friday the 13th. Dr. Eric Carlson is an associate professor of physics at Wake Forest University. He's a nationally recognized researcher in his field, but he's also known for his skeptical views of numerology, the supernatural, and superstition. Dr. Carlson, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
You've researched particle physics for more than 25 years. How did the paranormal and superstition enter the equation?
It actually entered earlier than that. It was more when I was in high school. And as I recall, I was reading an article mostly about and written by James Randi, who was a famous skeptic. He recently passed away. He later founded the James Randi Educational Foundation. It wasn't focused on superstition in particular, but various unscientific beliefs and things like that. He was a magician by profession, but he was mostly focused on uncovering frauds who would claim to have supernatural abilities. But he was also interested in how people fool themselves into believing false things.
Well, this has been a particularly stressful year filled with uncertainty. We just had a Friday the 13th and what feels like a very unlucky year. What were you hearing about anxieties around that day?
Well, I've certainly have had anxieties of my own, but not necessarily ill-founded. There really are really bad things, and it is important to listen to scientists who attempt to use the scientific method to figure out what real threats are around us. But I think we have enough real threats from things like COVID-19, and I'm not going to even get into all the political concerns that are going on right now, to not have to worry about what are not real threats, things like Friday the 13th. There are Friday the 13th every year. There's between 1 and 3 of them. This is actually the second one this year. There was one in March, right when this COVID stuff all started. But, why is Friday the 13th considered unlucky? Well, it's a combination of a couple of things. There was a belief that the number 13 is unlucky for a variety of reasons. One of the more common things that it's attributed to was the 13 people present at the Last Supper, which, and then Friday was traditionally an unlucky day. But of course, we can take those old superstitions and ignore them. And nowadays we can say TGIF instead.
Well, you once led a group called the Carolina Skeptics who would gather together every Friday the 13th to do unlucky things just to prove a point. You survived. What did your research reveal?
So it wasn't really for the purpose of research, that was more publicity. But yes, we were trying to emphasize the importance of the scientific method. The idea that if you have a belief, you can normally test it and find out whether it's true or not. But among other things, to celebrate each Friday the 13th and garner some publicity, we would try to break a mirror while stepping on a crack, while spilling salt, while standing under a ladder, while opening an umbrella indoors. You get the idea. I, however, am personally allergic to cats, not just black cats, so I try to avoid cats in general.
Well, most of us are familiar with the old standards. What are some of the most outlandish superstitions that you've come across?
I don't know. I've come across different ones. You mentioned some interesting ones as well. I mean, my wife's family had a tradition that when you were walking down the street, you never let a pole pass between you because that would represent a separation, okay? Some of them don't sound that silly, like walking under a ladder, but it actually is. Really, all of these have very little basis in fact. The walking under a ladder was supposed to be violating a symbol of the Trinity because an open ladder sort of makes a triangle. But I'm not sure that I would say any one of these is any more outlandish than any of the others. If there's no evidence for it, why would you believe such a superstition?
Well, certainly in our household, if a bird flew in the house, it meant something terrible was going to happen. You'd never put new shoes on the table. Why are we drawn to believe certain habits or rules will dictate our fate? And why have they persisted for so long?
So there's a couple of reasons, and I will mention that there are psychologists who are much more of an expert on this than I am. But human beings are pattern matching. We have pattern matching brains, and it is very natural that we look for patterns in things around us and we say, well, this came with that, therefore they go together. But sometimes they don't go together. And you can understand why this is a good thing to have in your brain. After all, if you see something creeping along through the trees over there and it's a tiger, it's a good thing to run away. And the cost for being wrong about that, if you think about it, almost all our superstitions are negative consequences. The consequences of being wrong and running away from something that's not a tiger is much less than the consequences of there being a tiger and you not running away. So it's natural that, particularly with anything that's negative, that we are willing to pay the minor cost of avoiding it. On the other hand, I take advantage of these things. So like when I need to get a dental appointment, if I know there's a Friday the 13th coming up, I know it's pretty easy to get a reservation that day because nobody else wants that day. I'm perfectly happy to stay on the 13th floor of a hotel, though, of course, most hotels relabel them and pretend it's the 14th floor just because they don't want to. I guess they think they're fooling the superstitious people. I don't know.
Well, I think too, as you say, when it comes to negative things, it gives people a sense of control. It may be a false sense of control, but a sense of control.
That's definitely a very big part of it. And I thank you for bringing it up. I should have mentioned that myself. Yes, one of the big things about superstitions is we want to feel like our fate is in our hands. And there's a lot of studies that show that people are much more afraid of things they don't control than of things that they think they do control. And having that sense of control makes them feel better. So, for example, almost all of us don't have a problem with getting in a car and driving ourselves somewhere. But many people are afraid of being in an airplane crash because when an airplane crashes, you personally have no control over it. But as you are presumably aware, statistically, you're a much bigger risk driving 100 miles in a car than flying 100 miles in a commercial jet.
Well, and if you look back in history, superstitions can actually be downright dangerous. If you were a suspected witch in Salem, it could have cost you your life.
Yes, I'm not an expert on Salem, but of course, Salem, a lot of what happened there was political or greed or things like that. It was not just a matter of people being superstitious. But yes, people have a tendency to believe things that they think are to their advantage. And a lot of the people who were accused of being witches, it was to the advantage of their accusers to accuse them of this because I believe there was property transfer based on, if you were the one that pointed out the witch, you would be rewarded for it. And that is unfortunately despicable.
Is there anything at all you get superstitious about? Wear your team's jersey while they're playing? Anything at all?
Well, I tell people it's bad luck to be superstitious. So I guess in truth, I think I deliberately have tried to root out any superstitions that I grew up with. So the one I learned about was don't step on a crack. And so I remember when I was a kid, I would sometimes try to avoid that. And eventually I said, I have to simply stop paying attention to this. It's not a good thing for me. So to my knowledge, I'm not superstitious, but maybe I have some that I'm just unaware of. As for, I can't think of anything I really do to avoid something like that.
Well, regardless of the evidence and the facts, I think many of these superstitions have been around so long and are so ingrained, they're likely to continue. We thank you so much for your skeptical insights today, Dr. Carlson. Very much appreciated.
Well, thank you. Have a good day. And
you as well.
And may luck be with you. Well, anyway.
And with you.